All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to session 2. I'll be chairing this session today on communication and compassion, and as we navigate through these important topics, like a gentle current through deep waters, I'll be sharing a bit of my own story along the way. As midwives, clear, compassionate communication is at the heart of everything we do, whether it's with our patients, their families, or our colleagues. Miscommunication can lead to confusion, distress, or even harm. So, to get us started, I wanted to share a light-hearted example of how communication can go adrift when the message is technically correct, but the meaning gets lost along the way.
My son.
He's going to be all right.
Oh,
thank God.
Finally, some good news.
There's no other way to take that.
That's a great attitude. I gotta tell you, if I was getting this news, I don't know that I'd take it this well.
But you said he was all right.
Yes, he's lost his left hand, so he's going to be all right.
You son of a bitch! I hate this doctor!
He's a very literal man. Yes, that's more the way I would take the news.
Oh, this guy again.
How is he, Doctor? It looks like he's dead.
Oh my God!
Oh, little guy. The tears are coming. The tears just are coming. Just to be clear, it looks like he's dead or he is dead? It just looks like he's dead. He's got like blue paint on him or something. But he's going to be fine. What is wrong with you?
Doctor!
I'll let you see.
All right, well, that light-hearted example gave us a good chuckle. It also highlights the importance of our first topic, perinatal loss in practice, improving bereavement care. Because in the most vulnerable moments, the way we communicate can profoundly shape a family's experience of grief, their healing journey, and how they remember the care they received. These photos on the screen you see above are of myself and my baby sister Nicola. Nicola was devastatingly stillborn at term when I was 4 years old. This experience has understandably had a really profound impact on my life, but it has also become my primary motivation and the driving force behind my calling to become a midwife. When I speak with my mum and she reflects on her experience of bereavement care, what stays with her isn't just the loss of her baby, it's the silence that followed. She remembers the healthcare providers who, unsure of what to say, said nothing at all. And because of that discomfort, she was left alone in a hospital room for days, grieving, hurting, and feeling completely invisible. It is this kind of silence that we must learn to break. And to help us explore how we can better support families through such unimaginable loss, we are honoured to have the wonderful Eliza Strauss. Eliza is a bereavement midwife and the founder of the Perinatal Loss Centre in Melbourne. Eliza works to provide perinatal loss education and support to healthcare professionals who work closely with bereaved parents experiencing perinatal loss. She is also a birth suite ANUM and was the principal bereavement midwife in a primary maternity hospital in Melbourne. There she established a unique bereavement support program which supports bereaved families following a perinatal loss. Next up, we will be hearing about breaking barriers, the case for clinical trials in pregnant populations. As clinicians, researchers and advocates for maternal and newborn health, we are all committed to providing the best possible care for women and their babies. But that commitment relies on high quality evidence to guide our clinical decisions, shape our guidelines and improve outcomes. Yet as many of you are well aware, pregnant individuals have historically been excluded from clinical trials, often out of concern for safety or legal risks. While these concerns are understandable, the result has been decades of missed opportunities to generate evidence. This next slide is a small collation of photos from my pregnancy, a time where I was eager, engaged, and ready to be part of something bigger. I remember feeling a strong sense of purpose at the time, excited by the idea that during my pregnancy, through participation in research, I could contribute to change, that I could be part of a new era in maternity care. But in the end, my contribution didn't go much further than being a pregnant model for a hospital marketing campaign. Not because of lack of willingness, but because these opportunities are few and far between for pregnant people. So today we have the opportunity to hear from a leader who is challenging that status quo, the fabulous Dr. Billy Bradford. Billy is the Maternity Clinical Trials Team Leader for the Women's Healthcare Research Group and Senior Research Fellow at Monash University. She has extensive midwifery clinical practice experience across a range of settings, from community-based continuity of care to tertiary hospital settings, and significant teaching experience in both clinical and tertiary education settings. And finally, the last topic we will be hearing about today in this session is supporting and empowering our LGBTQIA+ community. As midwives and health professionals, we have a responsibility to create safe, respectful spaces for everyone we care for, regardless of their gender, identity, sexuality, or family structure. This session is an important opportunity to reflect on how we can better support diverse communities in our practice. It's about deepening our understanding, challenging assumptions, and continuing to grow both individually and collectively as advocates for truly inclusive care. These photos are of my younger sister, Chloe. So after the heartbreaking loss of my sister, Nicola, and facing challenges with fertility, my parents began the journey of adoption. After a long wait, Chloe joined our family, a spirited, energetic 2-year-old with a deep love for bananas and pyjamas. Fast forward to the year Chloe turned 18. One morning on her way to university, she sent my mum a simple text. Just a single rainbow emoji. No words, just that, and it said everything. Now, Chloe has faced more than her fair share of adversity over the years. As a young gay woman and now working as a steel apprentice in a traditionally male-dominated industry, she continues to face challenges in spaces that haven't been built with diversity or inclusion in mind. But perhaps the most painful of these experiences has been within the healthcare system, a space where assumptions carry real consequences and where discrimination, whether overt or unintentional, undermines the safety and dignity every person deserves. And we are incredibly fortunate today to be joined by Jess Permazel, a passionate advocate and expert in inclusive care. Jess is a registered midwife and community educator. They have dedicated their midwifery career to social justice and health equity and have been working in the LGBTIQA+ perinatal space for over a decade. Jess works as a clinical registered midwife and teaches LGBTIQA+ specific birth education and provides professional development to improve cultural competency and safety of perinatal health professionals. Jess is also a queer parent to 2 excellent high school kids. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Eliza Strauss.
Thank you very much. I have to say straight off the bat, I didn't have a late night. I didn't even drink, but I have woken up with a very raspy voice. So if I don't sound, not that you would know what I normally sound like, but I've got my water here. Hopefully I'll be fine. It was a great night. Thank you so much, Mercy Perinatal. I have gone to, I don't know how many GOUs, but I have absolutely loved them. So when I got an email invitation to come and speak, I even put off a European trip to be here. My husband was like, this is going to cost us a lot of money to change. And I'm like, well, I've got to do it. So thank you. I just saw the photo of me. Yes, it was sort of funny when you see a summary of your life on a slide and, I feel quite proud. So thank you for doing that. I didn't know you were doing that. If you go to our website, the Perinatal Loss Centre, there's lots of ripples, and I love seeing someone had a ripple yesterday. And really, the reason why we chose that as our logo was to really remind us all that the impact of loss on a bereaved parent or bereaved parents is always going to be beyond the people at the core of that loss. The loss will extend through to their friends, their family, their work colleagues, and absolutely to us as midwives where that loss occurred. It's really important to remember that and the impact that it has on us. I always like to firstly acknowledge the families that I have supported as a bereavement midwife over the decades. I've done a lot of theoretical sort of learning on top of my nursing and midwifery around grief and loss. But really, at the end of the day, I have learnt so much from the lost families and their babies, and I really want to thank them, and they have kindly given me permission to talk about them and share some of their photos with their babies. So there is a warning there that there are just a couple of photos of their babies who have died, and I cherish what they have taught me. For anyone here today that's had their own personal loss, my heart is with you. Firstly, you don't have to answer it, but maybe just think in your head, why did you go into midwifery? For me personally, I was an oncology nurse prior to mid, and I was in my 20s, and I was working with very young patients, blood cancers basically, at the Alfred Hospital. And, you know, people around me were saying, I think it's taking a bit of a toll on you. And I thought, okay, I think I agree. So off I went. I went on a backpacking tour, met my husband and lived in Europe for 8 years, but that's another story. And thought, okay, I'm going to go into a happy profession. I'm going to do midwifery. And life often goes in full circles, so I ended up being a bereavement midwife. We have a lot of fun in our jobs, don't we? These are my colleagues and friends, and I'm really proud to be able to say that, and a couple of you are here today. Gosh, we have some fun times when we're not busy. I've been a birth suite midwife for 25 years in a very busy birth suite. But in between times, there's lots of eating and lots of silliness, and I treasure those moments and memories. And what other profession allows us to do all of that? You know, where it's a cliche, but there's a reason why when you're at a party and stuff and people say, what do you do? And you go, I'm a midwife. And they go, oh, you know. And yes, it is often like that because of the privilege that we witness every single day in our jobs. And as I said, this is what I get to do pretty much most days, although I am kind of nearing retirement age by legal definition of whatever it is, but so I'm not doing so much birth suite anymore. Nobody signs up for this side of mid, but it happens and we need to manage it well. There's an assumption, isn't there, about the continuum of life. So we're born as a baby, obviously, and we assume that we're going to grow up through childhood, through puberty, adolescence, adulthood, and then we get old and we die. Now, this is an unconscious bias that sits in every one of us. So what happens when a baby dies? That is challenged. And we're not supposed to bury our babies and our children, are we? So when we go into mid, somewhere deep down, you know it doesn't always go well. But what happens when you walk into that room for the first time to meet a family that you're supporting a lot of this is playing in the back of your mind and held in your body. It's a really challenging area of mid and obstetrics, but it can be done really, really well, and it will have lifelong impact on that family. So conversely, care that's not sensitive and compassionate is going to stay with that family forever. Awkward things that have been said, wrong information that's been given will sit really negatively for that family forever. But I don't want to dwell on that too much because the talk's about improving bereavement care, and I think we're all getting a lot better at it. You might be happy to hear or not. I've got no data, I've got no research, I haven't done any studies. This is very much kind of what I've learned theoretically through my bereavement counselling and intervention course, as well as I set up a bereavement support program and ran that for a decade. And I encourage you all to go to the theoretical and to the guidelines. So the Stillbirth CRE has a brilliant guidelines around respectful and supportive care. And I do, if this is your interest, I do encourage you to go to their website. But I really wanted to try and summarise, I think this is the only really busy slide. I'm not going to go through every single one, but the reason I want to do this, and you're welcome to take a photo, is if you're on for a shift and you only have 8 hours with a family that's experienced a loss, you know, you're going to do your best, you're going to do what you can, but I really want to challenge you to try and think beyond that. There is this continuum of care after a perinatal death, and it starts at the time of the diagnosis and it continues through the labour and birth, the afterbirth care, the discharge home, which is, I feel, quite neglected, and I really want to start you thinking about acting as that conduit between hospital and home, because that's sort of why I went into this area. I just was so dissatisfied that we were sending our families home and going, well, what happens to them now? So we need to improve referral systems and how can we help them leave our hospital doors and then transition into this grief period, because they're not really grieving at the time they're in hospital with you. They're in shock, and we're managing that, and we're doing everything we can around memory making and all the wonderful things we can offer. But they're going to crash when they get home. So we do have a responsibility to start thinking about supporting them when they leave us. A subsequent pregnancy, if they are going to go on and have another baby, is absolutely going to be, I think we all know how, anxiety and fear-filled it is, and we need to manage that next pregnancy differently. And we're not great at debriefing and support for midwives and obstetricians and all the other health professionals, because we basically don't have a lot of time, and a lot of people don't know how to do it well. But that's my deathbed wish. I want that to change. Four very simple things I want you to walk away with. Acknowledge the loss. Work out in your own head what you're going to say when you walk into the room. Give them time and more time and more time. When families feed back that, I just wasn't given enough time to spend with my baby, or I wasn't given enough time to make decisions, my heart breaks. And I have worked for 38 years in hospital, so I know the pressures that we all face. But these families deserve time. Hospital pressures, bed blocks, all the things that we face every day have to be managed better so that these families have time with their baby. The next sad icon is we cannot, as health professionals, we're very used to doing and caring and ticking boxes and giving medication and removing pain. We are not midwives and obstetricians here. I want you to take that hat off and sit with someone in their pain and their distress. You are just another human sitting with someone that is going through one of the most difficult things they will ever have to experience. And lastly, always remember that the parents are the experts in the bereavement care of their baby. They look at you for guidance. They look at you because they think, I don't know what to do here. But I really believe deep down, intuitively, any parent, whether the baby's born alive or not, intuitively knows what is best for their baby. And our job is to support them in making those difficult decisions. Oh, can we go back one, please? Thank you. Training, and that's my passion now is training health professionals, particularly midwives, because you're all asking for it. It needs to be from government, state and federal, and I think that is improving with some of the reports that have been coming out in New South Wales especially, and South Australia are doing the same. But if your organisation is not offering support in perinatal loss training, I would be going back and asking them for it. Because what I have learnt is midwives come up to me all the time and say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, and I'm so scared of saying the wrong thing. So the only way around that is by training. And training, it's not days and weeks and months. You know, I wrote an online training program because there was nothing around when I wrote this program. So it's 5.5 hours. It's hosted by the Centre of Perinatal Excellence. There's brochures on the help desk. You know, if this is your passion or your interest or you want to upskill, I just recommend to try and get something in an educational sense. If you can offer a dedicated bereavement space, that is fantastic. It's not always possible, but I'm like a dog with a bone. So where I work for the past 20 years, every new CEO, I just kept asking and asking and asking. And eventually one of them said yes. And a very small budget, and I was able to develop a dedicated bereavement space for the families because this is what they want. If you can have a bereavement midwife, fantastic. Bereavement team, even better. And if you can't achieve either of those, find some champions, what we call champions, people that have an interest and want to improve care for these families. There must be support from your organisation, and that's, you know, not only do they believe in the culture of looking after these families effectively, they've really got to be behind that in bereavement policies and systems and processes that are in place to help you to support these parents. And a contact person for the family if you can. I mean, the program that I set up is quite unique. So the parents got a mobile number and we worked on call for 12 hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. No one ever abused it. But what it meant was that family never had to repeat their story twice. And, you know, hospitals pay theatre staff to be on call. Why can't we do it in the setting of a bereavement midwife? Memory-making opportunities, which I'm now going to just ask, you know, just have a think over the next couple of days. What are you offering at your workplace? I mean, this list is not exhaustive, but, you know, I'm really hoping you're able to answer that, yes, we offer at least 80-90% of these things. If you don't have a cuddle cot, contact me and I will help you get one. What are you including in your memory folders? There's so much that we can be putting into memory folders, and I've made memory folders for parents that weren't with me at the time of their loss. It might have been years later, but for whatever reasons got lost, moved house. I know once a mother rang me 10 years after her loss, and her ex-husband wouldn't give her the memory folder with the photos and everything in it, and footprints, and of course I couldn't replicate photos and hand and footprints, but I could do everything else. And she was so traumatised. She remembered she had a girl. She couldn't remember the day, the date, the time. So I pulled her medical history and I was able to make a new memory folder. And memory folders can be made for any gestation. And I really want to impart with you that not only does research say that gestation is irrelevant as far as the grief response goes, it should be irrelevant to you unless you're looking after this mother, a bereaved mother, in a clinical capacity. And I know that sounds really strange, but if you remove the gestation in your mind, you're going to remove the unconscious bias that you have, that this is going to impact on her or her and her partner in a particular way. As counsellors, we don't even read summaries and details around the loss, because I want to walk into that family and be with that family in their grief, whatever they're presenting with. I've worked very closely for 20 years with Mark Umstead. I'm sure you all know him, and he referred a lot of his lost mums to me for counselling, and he'd say, Liza, come down to my office and get my antenatal summary. And bless him, he was, the most organised obstetrician I think I've ever worked with his notes. But I'd say, thanks, Mark, and I'd put it in my handbag, and I wouldn't bring it out until after the counselling session. I don't expect you all to do that, but just try to not get too hooked on the gestation. And are you including the extended family in discussions, and perhaps talking to them about the possibility of siblings, grandparents and other important people coming in to meet that baby? There's nothing quite so beautiful for me when I'm seeing that collective grief with a family and their extended, people that are really important to them. And that's going to help them for months and years later, because they're going to be able to talk together and talk about that shared experience that they all had with the baby. Sorry. Can you go back one? Thanks. So this is the Willow Room, which, as I said, very small budget. Amazing what you can do when you go out shopping, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to set up a beautiful space. And I remember the very first couple, they were a couple that got to use the Willow Room. She messaged me a couple of weeks later and she said, Liza, I walked into that room and I felt like I was being given a big hug. And for me, that was just so amazing to hear. And that's my unit manager and Armini. So Armini and I ran the program for the first 5 years on my own, on call every day. And after 5 years, I said I need help. So trained up Armini, and now she and I have both stepped away, and there's 2 other bereavement midwives running it now. I'm going to flick through in the interest of time. Feel free to take photos. Just a couple of things I'll point out. As I mentioned, just try not to walk in that initial moment where you're meeting a bereaved family. Try not to walk in with medical equipment, because what that's saying is that you're just another human being walking into their space. So hopefully you've taken the CTG out of the room, but try, no stethoscopes, sort of no notes, no portable blood pressure machines. I mean, I don't even take baseline OBS in that first instance unless mum is clinically unwell. My only priority is sitting down and connecting with that bereaved mum, and if she has a partner, the partner as well. So that they feel that there is hopefully going to be a connection, and that sense of this person cares about why we're here and what we're going through. Hopefully you've all got supportive colleagues, that first initial meeting, you can imagine how difficult it is for them to walk through your hospital doors. So say to your colleagues, can you please just answer my buzzers for the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever you can afford to give that family. Reallocate, do what you have to do just so you're not going to get interrupted. I make sure I pull up a chair. I'm not standing next to the bed. Mum's usually in bed, but I'm not standing next to the bed. I'm not standing sort of over the bed. I'm taking a chair, and if she has a partner, I'm making sure that I'm in between both of them so that my eye contact is shared between the two of them. And really important to identify yourself when you introduce yourself. Unfortunately, I've been a patient a lot in my life, and I'm always amazed how many people don't introduce themselves and how many don't sort of tell you who they are, and you're left guessing. And it's sort of a good thing that it's happened to me over a lot of my admissions because, you know, it kind of stuck with me like, oh, I think she was a nurse, or I think he was this or that. They probably will assume you're a midwife by the way you talk, but just make it really clear and say, my name's Eliza. I'm here on, I'm going to be supporting you today till 3:00. Whatever your sort of narrative is, just make it really clear for them. Acknowledge their loss and stop, and then pause. And what that allows, and it's hard to do because we're often talkers as health professionals. We're used to chatting, we're used to giving advice, and we usually do it 100 miles an hour because we're so busy. But I really want to encourage you to just let that fall in their laps, because what it will allow you or allow them to do is most of the time they won't say anything. They'll appreciate that you've acknowledged that they're there in a very difficult situation. But it sometimes lets them say something that's your starting point from what to talk about next. So it's a really, just do it as a bit of an experiment, even if you did it with someone that hasn't experienced the death of their baby. Just see what happens. It's a very different way of practicing. Get used to awkward pauses, Again, it's not about chatting and talking, and it's a hard thing to do, but they just can't be overloaded with this chitter-chatter. They say with shock and distress, they really can only retain about, somewhere between 20 and 40% of what you're telling them. So just slow down your speech and just let things settle and don't overload them with information. If you say the wrong thing, and it absolutely happens, I've done it myself, I've witnessed it, just own it and name that elephant in the room. So say, it's come out clunkily or inappropriately, and just say, I'm so sorry, that is not what I meant. What I meant to say is, and then reiterate. And because that's what they're going to appreciate you trying to bring that back versus just, oh, I hope they didn't hear that, because of course they heard it. It's always from a place of love and good intention, and it's often when we're nervous and we just don't know what to say, and then sometimes we end up saying the wrong thing, but definitely just name it. Tell them there's no rush to make decisions. We can't be hurrying them for these really, really difficult decisions that they have to make. Often it's around, post-mortem, whether or not to see their baby, whether or not to bring the other children in. They're really difficult decisions that they're making with a very unclear, foggy head. So say, if it doesn't feel right for you to work this out now, let's revisit it later. And even if you say no to whatever you're offering them, also let them know that indecision and change of mind is extremely common. And they want to hear that other parents have also struggled with this. So I often say, I will absolutely respect and support your decision, but what I do want you to know is that many, many parents change their minds at some point over the hours and days that you're going to be with us. If that's the case, let us know, and that's why we're often going to ask you 2 or 3 times about something that we're offering. It's not to pressure you, it's just that we know many, many parents change their minds, and it's usually around seeing the baby. Yeah. Parents love it, just as they do when you have a baby that's born alive and you ooh and ah over them and use their baby's name and say what a beautiful name and what beautiful ears your baby's got. Parents love that. And we must remember that anything we offer for a live baby, we should be offering for a baby that's died. So there's a lot more that bereaved parents want, but I think it's good to know these sort of 6. They want to be kept informed at all times. They want very clear information, and please follow up with written information for the reason I spoke about earlier, that verbal information is often forgotten or often confused. And who's the appropriate person to do that? I'm very happy to consent parents for post-mortem. I've spent time with a perinatal pathologist witnessing autopsies on babies, so I can answer any questions. But if you're not the appropriate person for that and you're not confident to do so, please don't try and attempt it. It's a horrible 2-page form, and there's some really tricky questions on the form. So we need to find someone that is comfortable doing that. They want control and they want choice. So they want you to offer them options. And I know you feel like often you're overwhelming them with options, but we have such a small window to offer things to them that once they walk out those hospital doors, that moment is gone. And what they do is they go home and they go on Facebook support groups, and somebody says, I got to take my baby home because that was offered by my hospital. And they think to themselves or say to themselves, well, we weren't given that option. And it can add to their distress and their ongoing grief. And on that note, I hope you all know, I set up a policy that anybody can take their baby home unless it's a coroner's case. And in 20 years, I've never had a coroner's case. Maybe some of you have, but even after the coroner's through, that baby can often go home to spend time with the family. When it happens, it's few and far between, but when it happens, it is the most incredible experience for that family to have. I've had heartfelt go to people's homes to take photos in the family home, in the set-up nursery or in the park or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of support out there for that to happen. It's just 2 forms. I just wrote a very simple policy, and then they have the health and safety information that goes with that. But we're not separating, unless you've got an unwell baby, we're not separating parents from their babies. So why are we separating them when a baby dies? They want you to create memories, so that's what I was talking about earlier, time with the baby, memory folders, memory boxes, etc. And the obvious one, I think, is the kindness and sensitivity of staff. And this sums it up really beautifully. Parents don't need protecting. They need the chance to be parents while providing their child dignity and the creation of memories. And that's little Charlie, who I will never forget, 26 weeks gestation. Bereaved parents never forget the understanding, respect and genuine warmth they receive from caregivers, which can become as lasting and important as any other memories of their lost pregnancy or their baby's brief life. Now, I do a whole module on self-care in my training. I tried to just put it down on one slide just so I absolutely recognise you and the difficulty around looking after these families. You might feel helpless, hopeless. You might go home, ruminate, and that's completely normal to go through all that the day presented for you and wondering perhaps could you have done things differently? Gosh, I wish I hadn't have said that. Did I have a part to play in this? I hope not. But, sometimes we do go home. Even if we did nothing wrong, we can still think that way. It can be a really anxious and horribly fearful shift for you. And it can also present this existential insecurity where you start to sort of question your own values and what does life actually mean because you have witnessed such distress in this family. I do like to always affect change whenever I speak. You don't have to do this now, but please, over the next day or so while it's fresh, just jot down at home 3 things that you feel you can change, either in the way you deliver your bereavement care or the way you can put pressure on your organisation to change things. As I said, getting near to that retirement age, I have decided to walk away from the hospital pretty much. I think I still have to try and keep up my APRA hours, but education and training now is my passion. And in the last month, I decided to do something creative in my remaining professional years, and I am now a baby urn maker, so I actually make the baby urns myself. And that's been an amazing thing, and it's obviously still in the realm of what I've been doing for the last few decades. My contact details, but as I said, there's my pamphlets are on the help desk. Feel free to contact me for anything. And I know it's a really difficult thing to listen to. I want you to all take care of yourselves. And I thought it was really important to end with a laugh.
Now, Doctor, shall we update the father?
I am the father.
The husband in the same room. What happens if you see her downstairs department shaky?
Wrong show.
I'm not the husband. We're not married.
Oh, Tony, call a proper midwife.
These two not helping. Leave it to me. I'm the lead. We just need a roaring coal fire and a lovely cup of tea made by a kindly neighbour.
One is splendidly saying that this is one's birth, because it's twins, and one has done triplets. Series 1, Episode 6. Tina O'Brien from Strictly played the mother. It was very moving.
All my births are moving.
No, they're not. You're just the bossy one.
I'm the bossy one.
You're the comedy one.
What are you then?
The beautiful one. I waft about being beautiful, silly. Whenever I waft, music plays, silly.
Excuse me, the lead. Which one am I then?
You're the hopeless one.
No, I'm the hopeless one.
You're the weird one.
And tiny.
No, you're massive.
Rude.
Shall I tell you which one I am? I'm in considerable pain in that I've got something massive coming out of my inappropriately proportioned clacker. Thank you.
Tickety-boo.
Stop tickety-booing.
Sauce the lead, sauce.
Thank you, Eliza, for such a thoughtful and deeply important presentation. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker to the stage, Dr. Billy Bradford.
On a blanket with my baby, that's where I'll be.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. The big arrow. So as somebody who is new to these lands, I feel it's important to say where I'm from. I'm from born and bred in Heretaunga, Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, which is on the east coast of the North Island. It's a beautiful place. And I feel very privileged now to live here in Melbourne, and so I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands and their elders past and present. Thank you so much, Mercy Perinatal, for hosting this amazing event. I feel really privileged to be part of this. So my topic is around clinical trials and what the barriers are to us conducting clinical trials in pregnancy. So I thought, first of all, I'm just going to go through what is a clinical trial and why we need them. So one of the earliest clinical trials was conducted in 1747 by James Lind, a Scottish doctor in the Royal Navy. And at the time, scurvy was a huge problem for sailors. And Lind wanted to see whether citrus fruits could help. He'd seen that perhaps it might, so wanted to try it do a trial and test. And so he selected 12 sailors with scurvy on a ship and divided them into 6 pairs and gave different treatments to each pair of sailors. And the treatments included drinking cider, drinking vinegar or seawater, eating citrus fruits, and what they over a week period. So what he found after that week was that the sailors who were allocated to citrus fruits recovered, which provided proof of a cure. There was no placebo. That was an innovation that was yet to come. And any history buffs in the audience might have noticed that it was quite some years later that Captain James Cook was trying to come up with ways to convince his sailors to eat vitamin C-rich foods. So translation of research findings into practice was a problem then, like it is now. And clearly there were some problems with ethics there too. You've got to feel sorry for the poor guys who got allocated seawater with scurvy. But the important element to understand here is that a clinical trial is a test. It's a test of a potential treatment. And so there are many types of research that are helpful for us in midwifery for informing our practice, but clinical trials are specifically concerned with effectiveness of an innovation. So whether that's a new medication or combination of medications, a new device, a new surgical technique, or it might be a diagnostic test or screening procedure, or it might be testing a new way of preventing disease, such as vaccines or lifestyle or behaviour interventions and so on. So the purpose is really to test whether that effect that we might think is there is genuinely, objectively there. And we learn a whole lot of other things in the course of conducting clinical trials as well, things that are relevant for implementation, like the number needed to treat, the costs, and also acceptability of that innovation for patients and for the healthcare setting. So, before I move on, I do want to outline just some of the steps that are taken, that are involved in bringing a potential innovation to actual clinical care. And we often portray this process as this nice linear timeline where that goes from benchtop to bedside, but as shown in this diagram here. But don't let the simplicity of this diagram fool you. There are a lot of hurdles to overcome at every step, and this is a very long process. So first of all, when formulating a hypothesis, a lot of preliminary work needs to be done, and just even formulating a good hypothesis can take many years and many studies. And the feasibility of a potential innovation needs to be tested as much as possible in laboratory settings before being applied in humans. And that can involve testing in animals or computer modelling. It can involve and it requires analysis of existing data. So once it's been established that maybe a hypothesis is worth testing, the next phase is what we tend to talk about, phase 1 trials, where we might test something in a small group of humans. And the reason we would have a small group is just so that you're minimising any risk of harm if there are side effects that no one's aware of as yet. And these phase 1 studies can be about working out the appropriate dosage and obviously picking up any adverse effects that no one knows about just yet. So once those phase 1 trials are done, then it's a matter of moving on to a larger group of patients, and so it's often in a single centre, and that's where these are often placebo-controlled trials, or you're testing the new treatment against the existing treatment, and you're actually measuring effectiveness in these trials. And then the next stage is phase 3, where you would often be applying that innovation across multiple sites or in a larger population to really measure effectiveness there. And the next step, which doesn't always happen, but we do see more, particularly in vaccine trials, is where there's ongoing monitoring of possible adverse effects in a larger population. So, why do we need clinical trials in pregnant populations? It's a bit mad that I'm having to ask that question, that we have to ask that question. And the short answer is really because women, half of the population, deserve effective health treatments. And the fact is that women with existing health conditions can become pregnant, and therefore we need information about whether they can or should continue with medications or treatments that they're already using. Also, women who don't have health conditions and are pregnant can develop health conditions during their pregnancy. And we know that that obstetric conditions that aren't managed well can have negative long-term consequences for the women and for their babies, and ultimately for society as a whole. We've got a lot of unanswered questions in maternity care. And when we look at our scorecard, just for some of the major important outcomes, it's not looking that great. We have infertility rates that affect 1 in 6 people across the globe. Preterm births have increased in recent decades. There's been a small recent attenuation in that increase, which is largely due to reductions in iatrogenic late preterm birth, not necessarily to those early preterm births that are the ones that have the worst impacts. We've seen, despite a lot of effort, that there's no real significant reduction in perinatal deaths globally. And in fact, this is the latest Australian data, and you'll see that little peak at the end there that we have had an increase in the last year's national data in stillbirths, which has contributed to an increase of perinatal deaths altogether. And what we're also seeing is rates of intervention are rising, and therefore costs per birth are increasing. And of course we need interventions, but you do have to ask the question around efficacy and cost benefit here when we're seeing more and more interventions and not necessarily seeing better outcomes. So, unanswered questions in pregnancy care are part of a much larger picture of a lack of advancement in women's health research generally. And while we're seeing progress in so many areas of modern life, even just in my own life, when I talk to my kids about, before the internet, they can't believe that anyone existed then. But there's so much that amazing technology that we live with. In so many ways our lives are getting better, but women's health is an area that lags far behind. And the McKinsey Institute, I do recommend having a look at this report, has published an insight report into the women's health gap. And they've highlighted that women spend 25% more time in poor health than men, and mostly that's in their working age years. And this has an economic impact on women's lives and on society in general. So why is that? Why do we have a women's health gap? Well, there are a number of reasons, and one of them is that we fail to take into account the significance of sex on women's lives. We live in a world where historically we've considered people to be men, and our view of the normal human is a male person. And this is so ubiquitous that we don't even think about it. I was in my dad's new Tesla the other day, and it's got software that shows you where pedestrians are on the screen. So when you're driving around busy streets, all the pedestrians are male. But it's just so common we don't even think about it. And the impacts for women of this, of living in a built environment that's designed for men, are very real, and ranging from bystander reluctance to commence CPR on women who have had a cardiac arrest, for which lack of CPR dummies that have breasts has been implicated, down to the design of motor vehicles and safety testing using male bodies as the standard, which leaves women, despite being less likely to be in a car accident, at greater risk of serious injury. But most important for this context is that sex has been overlooked as a biological variable which can affect how disease presents or how a medication works. And so symptom pictures of the major diseases have all been developed in male subjects, meaning that we have limited understanding about how diseases present in women. And this male-centric view has even extended to how we develop medications. Female animals have historically not been used because their hormones make things all a bit messy. So even in how we develop drugs from the ground up, sex has been overlooked. But sex is not the only thing that matters. So does gender. And working in concert with a male-centric built environment, gender-based assumptions about women also contribute to the women's health gap. And this means that women are less likely to be taken seriously when they're reporting symptoms, which leads to things like women presenting with stroke having lower rates of diagnostic testing and being diagnosed later, and women being prescribed less pain relief than men by body weight, or waiting longer to receive pain relief. And so some of these gender-based assumptions are that women are they're weak, they're manipulative, prone to exaggeration, and that can lead to delays in them getting proper treatments. And we all have gender bias. I think we often think we might not, but it's so pernicious in our lives that we can have gender bias without really realising that we do. Something I notice, I often talk about fetal movements. That's my main area of research. And the question I'm asked most frequently, hands down, is, well, what do we do about women that are lying about their babies not moving? So, what are the barriers to conducting clinical trials in pregnant populations? I've broken these down into four, just some of the main key areas. So, and these are the ones that are most apparent to me in my clinical trial research work. And these are underfunding, governance and regulatory requirements, safety and liability concerns, and workforce capacity. And I'm just going to go through those one by one. So first of all, underinvestment in women's health research. So women's health research has been systematically underfunded, and even today, according to recent estimates, just 7% of research funding worldwide goes towards issues that affect only women. And the fact is, money makes the world go round. Quite simply, when you invest in an area, you make progress in that area. So just to give you some examples of what that underfunding looks like, in the United States, the National Institute of Health allocates 11% of its budget to women's health, women's-specific health. In Canada and the UK, 5.9% of grants between 2009 and 2020 went to research that looked at female-specific outcomes or women's health. In 2015, there were 5 times more scientific studies on erectile dysfunction than on premenstrual syndrome. And the monies spent on erectile dysfunction are 6 times greater than what's spent on endometriosis research, for example. And it's not just government funding, it's also charitable organisations. So the female cardiologist who was the first to highlight the differences in how women present with cardiac arrest compared to men, when she went to charitable organisations to try and get funding for her research, she was told, but women don't have heart attacks. The other area that's a barrier is regulation and governance requirements. Now, regulation and governance is really important, and I do sit on a Human Research Ethics Committee myself for my sins, so I do know how this works. Of course, we need to have regulation and governance of health research. It's necessary for keeping people safe and for ensuring that research is high quality. But just as with trade, when you have a lot of barriers, it slows things down, something the Americans seem to want to learn again for some reason. But when there are excessive barriers to conducting research, it has a chilling effect. It slows things down, which obviously regulations are necessary, but there also needs to be a balance because progress is also going to keep people safe. So one of the major barriers is the perception of women as being, of pregnant women and the fetus as being part of a vulnerable population. So in Australia, ethical approval for research is governed by the National Statement on Ethical Conduct in Human Research. And this statement sets out who is vulnerable, and this is the list of people who are vulnerable: children and young people, people highly dependent on medical care who may be unable to give consent, people with cognitive impairments, intellectual disability or a mental illness, women who are pregnant and the human fetus, and people who may be involved in illegal activities. Also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So the term vulnerable is generally applied to populations who may be unable to give consent or are vulnerable to being subject to exploitation. And it's been argued that neither of these should be applied to pregnancy. I'm often reminded when I think about this problem and the idea of pregnant women being vulnerable of, does anyone know who this is? This is Catherine Switzer, who was the first woman to officially, because there was someone who ran it unregistered beforehand, but the first woman to officially run the Boston Marathon. And when she did, there was a bit of a scene that one of the officials tried to grab her, the guy behind there, and it was quite, apparently quite confronting and sort of aggressive scene where she was, the official tried to forcibly stop her from running. She was protected by other blokes who were running alongside her, which is very cool. But at the time, women weren't allowed to run marathons because it was believed that if a woman ran more than 800 metres, that could injure their reproductive organs. And further, they were too weak, probably not athletic enough to be able to run the distance. And I just think of all the women I know now who run and love running, and to think this was what people believed not that long ago. So the Phases Working Group have argued that we need to have a conceptual shift, that we need to stop thinking about women and pregnant women as vulnerable and start thinking about them as complex, and that we need to assume they have the capacity to make decisions for themselves. We do in every other area of law, so I don't know why we don't when it comes to research. And we also need a conceptual shift from thinking about protecting women and the fetus through research rather than protecting them from research. So when it comes to safety and risk, obviously they're very important. And the thalidomide disaster really showed us what can go wrong when a careless approach is taken to giving medications in pregnancy. And so in response to the thalidomide disaster, what happened was pregnant women were just removed across the board from basically no medications were able to be tested on pregnant women, full stop. And while that was revoked some years later, the shift is much more in-ground. So the concept that pregnant women should be not included in drug trials has been very hard to shift. And this is why we're in the situation now where the antihypertensives that we use in pregnancy, we're stuck with methyl-dopa and labetalol, because they were the things that were first given in the 60s when there weren't all of these ethical requirements, and nobody has been allowed to test anything else since because it could harm someone vulnerable. But we know that the newer antihypertensives have better safety profile and more tolerable, more better tolerated by patients. So we heard yesterday from Sue about how tight control of hypertension is beneficial, and you just wonder what opportunities we're missing out on for potential medications that might achieve that better. So when it comes to safety and risk, there's the fear of liability is a major driver for funders and sponsors of medication trials. And in a recent report that was commissioned, I believe, by the federal government in the US, but a commissioned law report looking at liability of research involving pregnant or lactating women. And they found that there was virtually no liability issues in testing of medications for in pregnant and lactating women. But what they did find was significant evidence of liability for approved medications post-market. So the risk has simply been shifted down the line. The researchers, the controlled studies aren't being done, but instead medications are being introduced off-label in the population without proper monitoring, and actually putting a much larger group of women potentially at risk. And certainly any midwife who's been around for any period of time, we've seen a number of medications come into play that are off-label, and we just give them because out of desperation and there's no other option. So this group have concluded that by excluding pregnant and lactating women from clinical studies due to perceived liability, these populations, as well as their fetuses and breastfeeding children, are harmed. So the thalidomide disaster obviously has cast a long shadow in terms of public perception, and this disaster and other historic incidents where healthcare providers and researchers have betrayed the trust of the public takes some time to heal. But I will say that women are altruistic and willing, and it always amazes me the interest pregnant women have that we approach for some of our trials, and finding out what's going to be best and wanting to help solve some of these problems, even when it won't benefit them, just so that other people in future might have a better idea of what works. Women are amazing. So I do think we need to make that shift from protecting women and babies through research rather than thinking that we need to protect them from research. So the other area of risk is lack of workforce capacity. And I will say that research is a team sport, and this is some of my lovely team. Teams need supportive environments to thrive. So historic underinvestment in women's health research, and particularly research in pregnant populations, has meant that our capacity is reduced. We just don't have as many people with the skills and knowledge, and we don't have enough flow of studies coming through and enough funding to keep things ticking over and to keep the excellent people that know how to do this stuff working in this field. So we need institutional support, and we need research positive environments to be able to grow and sustain that research workforce, because we're quite thin on the ground right now. So I don't want to be too doom and gloom. I've tried to have a think about how we might overcome these barriers. I've tried not to be too bitter about ethics. I don't know if that came through or not. Maybe it didn't. So I thought, I know it's a bit overused, but a SWOT analysis can be a good way to have a quick look at these things. So how do we overcome these barriers? Well, when I think about our strengths, I think one of our strengths is definitely our people. So we now have more and more women in science and medicine who bring their lived experience to that. We have a more highly educated and critical thinking midwifery workforce who play an important role in this also in all areas of clinical research. In terms of weaknesses, it can't be overstated the legacy of neglect of women's health. And this means that we've actually got a smaller pool of expertise to draw on. We've got significant data gaps, including in information about women and women's health and medications that might be used in women. In terms of opportunities, weaknesses can always be flipped to be viewed as opportunities. And so one of the opportunities that's occurring now is there's more advocacy. Women are making noise about the gender health gap and about women's health problems. And with that increasing advocacy and awareness, hopefully more funding will become available. It's also an opportunity that the lack of the lack of research in women's health means that there's potentially some good veins of new discoveries that are yet to be tapped, and that will be a great thing. But there remains a pernicious gender bias, and that threat remains. Currently in the US, we're seeing now requirements brought in that pregnant women have to get the permission of their husband before being able to join a clinical trial. So this kind of bias is not going away, even if we think we're moving on. So the perception of the woman as a vessel for the baby and prioritising any risk, however small or unlikely, to the baby over any real or actual risk to the woman continues to be a threat and something that could stifle progress. So just to close, clinical research is integral to, clinical trial research is integral to advancement of women's health. There are lots of different types of research that contribute to and inform our practice. Qualitative research helps us to understand people's experiences. Observational studies help us to understand populations and risk factors and progress of disease. But we do need clinical trial research to tell us about what's effective. Health research funding needs to prioritise women's health because there's a lot of catch-up work to do. Ethical and regulatory guidance documents need to be revised to ensure fair participation of pregnant women in research. And some countries have updated their documentation to regard pregnant women as complex rather than vulnerable. Australia hasn't yet. And the maternity care research workforce needs to be strengthened and supported to do this work. I know midwives often come to conferences like this for tips, wanting to know what's new and what they can take back to their workplaces to advance practice. But we can't advance practice without clinical trial research. And women want to be part of clinical trial research. Midwives want to be part of clinical trial research and have amazing ideas also for clinical trials that they themselves can lead. So we need to allow that to happen. So, and just want to finish by saying thank you to all of you, but also to my amazing team. Like I said, research is a team sport, and I'm fortunate to work with an amazing bunch of people for the studies that we do. And thank you also again to Mercy Perinatal. It's been really exciting to be part of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy, for such a bold and thought-provoking presentation. Please join me in welcoming our final speaker for this session, Jess Permazel. take a photo of this, please? My kids are going to love it. Hi, everyone. My name's Jess Permazel. I've had a good introduction already. I'm here to talk to you about providing affirming care to the LGBTQIA+ community. I have added a couple of extra letters into the letter rainbow for this talk. You'll see I've added in S and B, which stands for sister girl and brother boy, which is the language of choice for queer and transgender, gender diverse Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. That language is evolving, but we're going to end up adding some more letters. You'll all survive. I don't know how to do this. Am I touching with my finger? Oh. Thank you. So yes, I'm a midwife. My pronouns are they and she, and I work clinically, and I also work doing education, mostly community education, but also queer and trans and gender diverse specific birth classes through birth space. Click. I've got it. I would love to acknowledge these beautiful lands of the Wiradjuri and Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nations. Before I start, I'm very privileged that actually my main gig is working in Aboriginal health, not this is a side gig. And through that work, I have learnt so much about the history of birthing, traditional birthing practices, and I've had so much shared with me, and that is an immense pleasure and privilege that I, as a white settler, absolutely acknowledge is like not owed to me. I'm just very, very lucky to have it. I can't come up and speak on what I'm about to speak about without acknowledging that the stolen generation has not ended. I don't know if you know this, but more Aboriginal children today are being removed from families than ever happened during the stolen generation. And that is through the processes of child protection and our failings as a system to support people to thrive as fully formed humans and as parents. And part of, I'm a social justice kid, so I don't just want this little queer and trans thing to change, I want everything to change. Okay, I've also put up there, and I think you would all do very well to scan that QR code. That is a very recent training module on healthcare for Rainbow Mob, so for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander folks. It is Victorian specific, and these things are going to evolve and emerge more from mobs from all over the country, but right now this one's been devised in Victoria. It's not specific to perinatal care, but it is specific to healthcare. It's a little module, and you'll get some really good gems in there. Let me start. So I don't want you to yell this out, but I do want you to think about what the barriers you might have found in your practice have been around caring for LGBTQI+. I'm going to actually stop saying that. I'm just going to say queer and trans, and I hope you understand that I mean that in an umbrella context, because those letters are too many to keep saying. I understand that. So thinking about what some of those barriers are they that you are nervous that you're going to say the wrong thing? We've heard a bit about being nervous about saying the wrong thing. Are they that you've had this queer or trans family sit in front of you and you've looked at the paperwork and the data collection tools, and there is nothing on that to reflect this family that you're seeing sitting in front of you? What do you do about that? Is it that you work in a really small place and maybe you haven't actually been exposed to many queer and trans folks and people? There's lots and lots of barriers that are personal barriers, and then there's big systemic barriers as well. And we all have to kind of work to minimise those things. I will say that I came to this work accidentally. I've got 2 kids. I birthed our 2 children. And I will talk more about this later, but I made some very specific choices about the births that I had. I mean, I had some value around physiological birth, and I wanted to give that a really good go. But I also made some other choices about place of birth and care providers, very much based on the fact that we were a queer family. So
I had, I'm so old, when there was a birth centre at the Mercy, I had a baby there. Why do you think I made that choice? And then my second baby I had at home. Why do you think I had made that choice? Keep that in your head as I keep talking. But before we go on, let's just talk a bit about language, because I think this is something that people trip over a lot. And this is so much a key. It's not everything. It's absolutely not everything, but it's going to get you a long way. So the language in the LGBTIQA+ community is constantly evolving. You all know it. You've all complained, I'm sure, about an extra letter being added and not knowing what that letter means. But the language that we have is really, we use as much as we can to show how expansive we are, to show that we are trying to think outside the box, to show that we can create and evolve and make beautiful, big communities and families that are thriving. But that language needs to be reflected back at us. It can't just be this kind of silo where we use it and then you get scared about it, and so you know it in your head but you're too scared to practice saying it. In an LGBTQI+ context, we're thinking about identity terms that might be used to describe attraction, that might be used to describe gender as opposed to sex. Did you know they're different? Or about bodily experience. And we use identity terms to help tell you something about our lives. So I'm just going to kind of skip through a few key ones. Queer, there's some older people, some people in the older generation who are queer or identify on the rainbow somewhere, and who aren't, who don't like this word because it was used for a long time as a slur. Largely, we have really recreated it. It's my favourite word. It's an umbrella word. It catches kind of all of us. And it also reflects a more expansive way of thinking, and I'm all about thinking expansively. So somebody who is a gay male could describe themselves as queer. Somebody who is a transgender woman might describe themselves as queer. It's an umbrella term. Make sure that the person you're using it with likes the word before you kind of take that too far. I'm not going to give you, please take photos, I'm not going to give you definitions of gay, lesbian, bisexual. I will quickly discuss pansexual. Pansexual is a word that's kind of evolved from bisexual as we started to understand that there are more than two genders. So somebody who is pansexual might be someone who is attracted to multiple genders. And we try to kind of move away from just bisexual in the understanding that there are more than two. Asexual or aromantic people are people who experience limited or no sexual or romantic attraction at all. That doesn't mean they're not having babies, so think about that. Gender, some of these words you'll have heard thrown around. Cisgender is the word that we use when our gender and identity correlate with what we've been assigned at birth. So I was assigned female at birth. Do I don't know. I don't know. Do I quite relate to all of the things that come with being a woman? I'm not sure, but that's why I really like the idea that we think really expansively. Trans or transgender, gender expression and identity that doesn't correlate with sex assigned at birth. So you might hear us using words like AFAB and AMAB, which is assigned female at birth and assigned male at birth. And that might be language that you find useful, or it might not. Non-binary, you might have all come across this, and maybe this is somewhere where I sit, I don't know. I'm thinking about it still. But non-binary is when you don't assign your identity to one or to male or female. Other language that we use around that might be genderqueer. What else? I've probably written it in here. Gender fluid, gender non-conforming. And people who are non-binary, you tend to use the pronouns they and them. And I just want to give a little anecdote, and I feel like I've been giving this for 10 years, but people like it, so I'm going to do it again. A lot of people who are scared of the language or are scared of difference come at us with the idea that they, them, it's not grammatically accurate, and it's absolutely untrue that that's the case. So look, somebody over there left their life jacket on that boat. I do wonder if they know that they've left their life jacket on that boat. Someone should give them a call and see if they know that they've left their life jacket on the boat. We use they and them in the singular all the time. And it can be a bit to get your mouth around it, but it is not grammatically incorrect, and it's transphobic to be using that as an excuse not to get your knowledge up and not to make a change in your practice. Dysphoria is a big deal, particularly, we all know a bit about dysphoria and dysmorphia, but it's a big deal specifically for transgender people or gender non-conforming people who might, and not always, but might experience psychological or physical distress when there's a lack of congruence between their gender identity and the gender they've been assigned at birth. And that might be about something specific, like perhaps having breasts when you don't identify as a woman, but it could also just be an overall thing as well. So it could be a little bit, it could be a lot, or it could actually be nothing. There are some trans people who don't experience dysphoria. They just feel very sure that they have been misassigned their gender. And misgendering, which in our context is actually the biggest deal. So getting people's pronouns right and making sure that we're not misgendering people when we're caring for them is absolutely the essence of kind of the care of our community. And it's really easy, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it. Somebody else here said, don't be afraid to own your mistakes, apologise and move on. We're going to do it. You're going to misgender somebody. I've done it many times. Don't make it that person's problem. You make an apology and you move on. They don't need to then appease your guilt because you got it wrong. Okay. Oh yeah, and sex. It is worth talking quickly about this. So in some of the research that I've done, there is no information around perinatal care in intersex people. It doesn't exist. So this is a new field, and I hope there's some intersex people out in the universe who are keen to start doing the research around this stuff. Intersex is the term used for and by people who are born with sex or reproductive characteristics that don't fit with the social norms, really. So in the olden days, and when I was a student midwife, I actually was at a birth where there was a baby born with genitals that were unclear, and the midwife said, "Oh my God, it's a hermaphrodite. You will never use that word again. Please never use that word." But in the olden days, that's what intersex was. It was characteristics that didn't fit right. Sometimes you have both genitals, female genitals and male genitals, but there's lots of variations of intersex. Endosex is the term we use for those for the rest of us who aren't intersex, so for people who don't have an intersex variation. It's really important to know that intersexuality is still pathologised, so little babies are still being born and having their sex assigned to them, even though they have indeterminate genitals or reproductive features. And that is causing a hell of a lot of pain in the intersex community as they grow up very confused about who they are and what their bodies are and what that all means for them. Okay, that's the language. I'll move on from that. Pathways to parenting. So, I'm sure there's even more than this, but these are the kind of the big ones. So, you like my turkey baster? I have 2 turkey baster conceived children. It was a 3-meal syringe. We didn't use a turkey baster. But yes, so we could conceive at home with a turkey baster if you like. It's probably a bit big. There's not much, you don't get that much semen. 3-meal syringe is more than enough. Don't assume that a queer family, a couple or individual hasn't conceived through sex. Whether that was on deliberately or not. Very few people who are using donor sperm are having sex with their donors, despite what people might think. But there are people in queer relationships where they have been, one person's been born with male reproductive organs and the other with female. And that is a thing, and people often assume that it's not a thing, but it's absolutely a thing. The kind of conception that we would all be more familiar with is conceiving through a clinic. So with IUI, IVF, plus minus donors, depends who else is in your family, whether they're a donor or not, and surrogacy. And then there's also kind of the options for non-birth parenting, so fostering and adoption, or choosing intentional family, co-parenting. So I will say that my family is kind of a bit expansive and doesn't look traditional anymore. I had my 2 children with a former partner, a woman. We broke up a decade ago. I have repartnered, and when And we have managed to make a lovely little 3-person co-parenting unit. It can be done. Like, do I want my ex at my house quite as much as she is? Maybe not. But we've made a very, I don't want my partner at my house sometimes either, we kind of have made what is a really lovely unit, and because we've thought expansively and we've put the children first, and they are the benefits of this, and that's why we're here, right? Some stats. So the first thing to know is what I do is political, and it's political for so many reasons. But in Australia, in the last census in 2020, we had a very conservative government who pulled all the questions around queer and transsexuality out of the census. And do you know what happens when you don't collect data about people? You don't have to put money into them. You don't have to invest in them, and you can keep claiming that they don't exist. That was a very, very political move. There had actually been an entire rainbow unit working on this 2020 data, and when Scott Morrison heard about it, he pulled everything. In the 2012 census, and the censuses before that were just very poor at data collection. They tried, but they didn't do a good job. So in the 2012 census, it identified that 12% of same-sex couples had children living in their care. Same-sex is not expansive enough to, I've just explained to you why not, is not expansive enough to collect accurate data. And there's no data collected in any censuses on children of single, queer or trans people. So when I was a single parent for a while, when I was a single parent for a while, there was nothing in that census. The kids were with me that night, but there was nothing in there to reflect who we were as a family. Medicare data from 2016 recorded that 44 males accessed the labour care item number. Those stats are going to be way higher than that. These are 44 males trans men who chose to identify themselves and do a lot of things to make that happen, but I can assure you there will be many more than that. And totally wildly, in the biggest, and this is a problem for our communities, in the biggest survey of of queer and trans people in Australia, the Private Lives Survey, no one asked about family, no one asked about children. So that's if we can't even do it ourselves, we're in big trouble. Boring. Okay, so I have had the privilege of being part of the Growing Queer Families Alliance, which we formed a few years ago, with a bunch of people interested in queer family and in perinatal health. And when we got ourselves together, we did a systematic review of the evidence base around perinatal care for queer and trans folks, which we found there were 37 articles in the whole world, so not very many. And we did that because we know there's so little data, and there's also no money for us to collect data. Like, I do so much work for free, I cannot tell you, because there is no funding to do this kind of work. We're doing it because we're passionate about it. But what emerged from that review was 4 main themes around the healthcare that people are trying to access when they're pregnant. Unavailability of information, services and support. And I mean, we are all frustrated by the systemic barriers around this for everybody. It's 10 times worse if you are not a heterosexual person in a nuclear family. Interpersonal competencies of health staff. We know this. We absolutely know this. We all can do better. And we know the midwives that we don't want to send into a particular room because we know this stuff. Heterosexist and cis-sexist care experiences. So think again about why the pregnancy care that I chose and apply it to this. I have had cause to be in hospital a lot in the last 6 months, and I cannot tell you how many times my partner has been ignored. Twice, somebody, one nurse said to me, "It's so nice that your mum sat with you all day. She's 2 weeks older than me." And the other day when I was in hospital, and these are all at big tertiary institutions, right, where there's posters everywhere. How many of you picked up one of these today, these rainbow lanyards. People are wearing the lanyards. A woman, a nurse walked into the room 2 weeks ago with a rainbow lanyard on. My partner was sitting next to me and said, "Oh, I can see that you've got a visitor. Would you like me to come back later?" And I said, "It's my partner. You can say anything." And she said, "Well, we've just got some stuff to discuss." She's wearing a rainbow lanyard, and she wasn't willing to acknowledge that we were the unit. And I'm tough, and I'm the person who's going to write that on my feedback form. I'm the person who's going to do the feedback form, and I'm going to write it. But this is happening in the maternity section of that very same hospital. I just said maternity. In pregnancy and labour care in that very same hospital, I had an email from a couple who had attended my classes last year, and it's the best thing ever. You'll know this when somebody sends you an email with a photo of the baby and the birth story. And I got all of that, and they said, and we'd made all these signs for the walls that explained that I was mama and my partner was baba, and my partner's pronouns were they and them, and not a single midwife, not a single care provider used the right pronouns, not even once for that partner. And that's spelt out. That is sitting right there. So if it can't happen when people are telling you what to say without you even having to ask, we're in trouble. And discrimination and traumatisation. So I don't know how much I want to go into this because I do think it's pretty boring. This is all the stuff I've found from practice and years and years and years, and all of the 37 articles just affirmed everything I already knew. The absence of inclusive information tends to be a real problem in terms of getting timely health care because people then do their own research, and so we know that probably a queer family is probably going to do better in an MGP program where they can know their midwife and make a relationship and get the individualised care that they need and deserve. But that person who's doing that research to find that out might be 12 weeks pregnant by the time they figured that out, and they can't get into an MGP program now. We all know that you have to be ovulating to apply. That's the best time to try and get into MGP. So that kind of stuff is delaying decision making and having an impact on what comes next. And if it's bad in the city, you can imagine what it must be like rurally and remotely. I mean, remotely horrendous. Interpersonal competencies of health staff. Poor communicating with the patient, with the person and the family, but also amongst themselves. And this is something that you will all know and you've all experienced. Somebody might go into the room and use the right language, get the pronouns right, and this can be applied to so many things, not just around gender and sexuality, come out of the room and talk to their colleagues using she, her pronouns and think that doesn't matter, but it absolutely matters because we have to make change holistically and fully, and that just indicates that you're not seeing the person in their full humanity, and it is our job to see people in their full humanity. So I want you to challenge your colleagues when they do that and say, "Oh, I thought they were non-binary. I thought they used they, them pronouns." It's not hard. They'll probably be embarrassed. They might get defensive. Just it's not your problem. There is very, very little training specific to perinatal health care. Basically, it's me. There's very few other people in Australia doing it. There's lots of people doing trainings around LGBTQI plus health. Geez, okay, 5 minutes. I've got to go fast. But not around perinatal care. So that's got to change. And to that end, it's happening. We are writing a chapter for the new PEM in preparation for practice. I am building a online training module, but it's all slow and most of it's unpaid and unfunded. The days of people being refused care aren't over. So a private practitioner can say, "No, I don't support your lifestyle, your choices," and can still say no on a religious basis for care. Okay. Central to everything is the language. It is not the answer, but it is one of the biggest changes you can make to have the most effect. I just want quickly to think about language, because this is where it all is for you guys. Take a photo of this. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some suggestions. So when we're talking about families, we're going to stop using the word husband. I mean, I can't believe we haven't already, but please stop using the word husband. Most people don't get married these days anyway. So partner is great. It catches everything. Partner, partners, parent, parents, co-parents. Ask the people you're caring for what the language is that they would like you to use. They're not going to be upset. They're going to be thrilled that you can acknowledge it with them. Think about what names might be used and ask that as well. Mama, mummy, mum, dad, daddy, papa, baba, donor and surrogate. People often refer to my kid's donor as their dad. He's not their dad. He's got 2 of his own children and he doesn't want 2 more. And my children have their own parents and they all have a lovely relationship, but he is not their dad. He is their donor. Other adults, they aren't, chosen aunts. Chosen family is a big deal in the queer and trans community, and to have that recognised, we're so lucky. To have the rest of the world recognise that is incredibly affirming. Feeding, there's some stuff in the media about how one trust in the UK is changing the language so that everyone has to say chest feeding. That's bullshit. That's not true. But we use the language that is important to the people. So ask, does somebody have dysphoria around their breasts? What language do they do? Are they going to lactate? Are they going to chest feed? Are they going to body feed? Feeding as a catch-all is a good start, and then you can, as you develop your relationship, you can kind of get deeper into it. This was my biggest learning. The very, very first time I cared for a trans person in labour, we were in a birth room and there was a birth pool, and I said to the student across from me, "Can you please check the maternal heart rate over the top of a transgender person?" And just slipped out of my mouth. It's not a maternal heart rate. This person's not a mother. So just being really, really mindful about defeminising the language wherever you can. So there's some ideas here about what you can do. It's hard. You'll get it wrong. I did, and I thought I was good at this. I thought I knew everything. I'm still learning so much. But just ask and try and do that thing, apologise and move on. Around other anatomy too, obviously. Are people okay with the word vulva? Is there a word they prefer other than that? Think about things like transvaginal ultrasounds. We might just call it an internal or a pelvic ultrasound. Okay. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I could talk for days and days and days. My biggest take home is, please, if you've got a lanyard or a sticker, make sure that you are actually a safe person, because if you're not, you're actually a very, very unsafe person. That's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Jess, for such a heartfelt and empowering presentation. I'd like to invite Billy and Eliza back up to the stage, and in the interest of time, we might just do 2, maybe 3 questions. Alrighty, I think Caitlin's got one up the front here.
Hi, this is for Jess. I was wondering, how do you find maternity hospitals are in terms of queer non-traditional families, such as polyamorous families, in terms of their accepting?
My experience, and I've cared in labour for one poly family. You saw them, the throuple. I was still I think I was a doula at that point. And they asked me to come because they'd had to attend their birth, and because they'd had a really terrible booking-in visit at a large maternity hospital which has rainbow flags and posters everywhere. And what I found in that instance was that during their labour, that was actually a very beautiful birth. She's really gifted with good genes and all of those things. People were so scared of what that was in that room that actually they just stayed away, which is not the right thing to do. but it worked for this family. Obviously, they were protected from whatever the biases and prejudices were. I found that in the past as well, not just with thrupples, that people are scared and they might open the door and close it again. I mean, we've all opened a door and seen what's in there and closed it again. But yes, I think a bit of that happens. And I think having me there as their kind of protector, for want of a better word, really helped and was useful. But they shouldn't have to pay me $2,000 to whatever it was to take care of them and to make that space safe for them. I think that's a really good point. I'm going to shut up in a second, but that is a really good point around accessibility. I chose a home birth. I chose to have a queer doula because I was socioeconomically able to do that, and that kept me much safer than the average person who walks into a public hospital or a private hospital and is at the whim of the person they get on the day. There's not millions of thrupples having babies either, so we are, this is new territory.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Yep. Caitlin at the front.
And the singing dampened my voice from last night. Thank you for the whole conference. I'll just say this is to Dr. Billy Bradford. I think we've got a long way to go ahead, and it comes back to, I remember watching 60 Minutes, and it was about the police dogs, the Victorian police dogs in 2018. They were fed the advanced dermacare food, and because it was a small group of animals and it happened to the Victorian police dogs, they couldn't eat, and around Australia they were being fed on ramps. They had an reflux problem, basically, etc. And it was only because it was a small group of animals they actually went in and researched and found the problem. As a midwife and an older woman in society, I'm really concerned about the genetic modified crops out there that none of us know about, and the chemicals, etc., added on our foods, etc., and the children, we eat it, and even medications, vitamins we're giving to women. I know every time I had Alivit, I'd go into SVT, so something in there. So we've got a long way ahead, and I do believe that women need to be respected and counted for, and we need more money. So thank you for your talk. It was very interesting, and I think we all should look out there.
Thank you.
All I can say is I agree. Thank you.
All right. I know you're all eager to get to lunch, so please join me in giving a round of applause to our